Tao abides in non-action, yet nothing is left undone. If kings and lords observed this, the 10,000 things would develop naturally. Go with the flow. We say this to each other often enough, usually if we are under stress or unsure of how to approach a task that seems overwhelming. Doubtless this phrase has become commonplace in the English language, but many of us don't give the idea a second thought. What does it actually mean to go with the flow? What is the flow? How does one actually go with it? Is there even a reason to? Where on earth is the flow even supposed to take us? We generally don't ask ourselves these questions as often as we say the phrase, but what if we knew that these questions actually held one of the big secrets to living happy, productive, and fulfilling lives? Answering them is vital to attaining this goal, and that is what we will do now. Many of us have heard of the flow state, or the zone, as described by athletes, musicians, and other performers. These terms are often used to describe the state in which someone performing a task enters a state of being in which they are able to perform the task without thought or judgment. They become so immersed in whatever it is that they are doing that it requires little or no effort on their part, and instead they reside in a meditative, almost trance-like state, as the painter becomes the painting or the dancer becomes the dance. In this state, despite the perceived lack of input on part of the performer, performance is at its peak, usually as well as the performer's enjoyment of the task. There is no trying too hard, no forcing of action, no contemplation of the intricacies of the performance. There is just performance for performance sake alone. Many people have heard of this flow state, but most people do not realize that it can actually be experienced on a macro level by adopting it as a life philosophy. We've become rather accustomed to being 100% in control of things, or at least trying to be. Everything from the westward American expansion to the marvel of modern medicine indicates man's desire to take nature and the universe by the horns and bend it to his will. Countless inventions, such as fast food and the microwave, have sprung up as a result of our desire to squeeze every viable moment out of a day. Whereas our ancestors learned to see eating as a joy and a blessing, our reality of having easy access to food at all times has taught us to see it as more of a chore. The idea of the self-made man conceptualizes our narcissism to the point that we actually start to believe that we are solely responsible for every bit of success we have ever achieved. Such a mindset causes our egos to inflate whenever we win, and crushes our spirits just as easily when we lose. Because if we and we alone are responsible for our every victory, it only follows that we are solely responsible for our every failure as well. The concept of the self-made man, far from its ideal of promoting autonomy and empowerment to the human race, often misses the mark completely and results in overconfidence, discouragement, and ultimately disaster. If we allow our every action and result to become attached to our concept of self in this way, we will become lost in a sea of emotional disarray, tossed back and forth with every wind and wave of circumstance. Why is this? This is because of one simple fact that the self-made man tries very hard to ignore. The blind spot in the concept of the self-made man is that none of us are truly and exclusively self-made. Any psychologist can tell you that a person is made up, at least in some way, of the circumstances and environment in which they are present. When talking about people's success, we usually talk in terms of hard work and good ideas, but we usually don't talk about the opportunities that were available to these people that contributed to their success. For example, Bill Gates certainly worked very hard to achieve the success he has, and that should not be minimalized. But many people don't realize that when he was young, he was very lucky to be one of the only people of his time that had access to a computer at all, and therefore was given a huge opportunity for a head start that most other people just didn't have. Thus, his hard work was of course a factor, but so were other variables that are completely outside of his control. Even the concept of ideas and how they come to us has been warped and distorted by man's insatiable desire to see himself at the center of the universe. Nowadays, we use the word genius to describe an intelligent person with a lot of ideas, but the ancient Romans saw it differently. The word genius actually comes from the name of an almost house elf-like character in Roman mythology that would follow people around and drop ideas upon them at random. It is only in modernity that we have presumptuously used the word to describe a person, therefore attributing all of the credit to them. So what does one actually do about this? The short answer is, well, to do nothing. One must not mistakenly believe, however, that the Taoist concept of non-doing equates with idleness or laziness, however. In fact, the two are very different. The first step to getting into the flow of life from a Taoist perspective is to perceive and acknowledge your rather shocking lack of control over it. Such a concept can be startling at first, but actually becomes quite peaceable the more time one spends with it. Accept the fact that if you set out to do something tomorrow, or within a week, or even in your life in general, the universe could cohesively conspire to ultimately foil your plan. If you had intended to visit your grandmother today, she could die before you reached her door. If you set out to become a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, something you said could be taken completely out of context and you would be forced to watch your life's work voraciously consumed and destroyed by cancel culture. But it is important to realize that the universe is not just an angry god with a trigger finger for lightning bolts. Often, the universe rewards us too, for seemingly no particular reason at all. The important thing to understand and accept here is that things are going to happen to you, both bad and good. And you can choose to fight the swirling rapids until you disappear, exhausted beneath the swell, or you can choose to go with the flow of the current, not hoping for or fearing what will come, only being one with the present moment, and addressing whatever comes up as your best and brightest self. This is what the ancient Taoist masters perceived as enlightenment, the simplest and most profound form of harmony and coexistence with the natural world. In nature, there are no planners, no agendas, no constant state of hurry, and yet the cycles of the natural world continue unassisted and unobserved. Everything in nature has a place. Everything is cared for and has its needs provided for naturally. Do we really have reason to assume that we are so different? Those who have the courage to unlearn the ideals taught to them by modern society and focus on the plain and simple truths of nature and the universe will find peace and serenity in releasing their grasp on the things they can't control and learning to go with the flow.